How many of you know the 10 Commandments by heart? If you do know them, shout them out. What's the first one?
Kill. Honor thy mother. Don't covet.
Actually, you just heard it in the first reading. There was a little cheat sheet there for you. Try it again.
Thou shalt not kill.
Good job. Second one.
Thou shalt not kill.
Third one. You.
Nice part. Too high.
Fourth one.
Honor thy mother.
5.
Kill.
6. Enough. Those are boundaries. Boundaries. God set and the community around us set so that we could be a people, a healthy people together. The Catholic people, they also have a set of boundaries. We call them the precepts of the church. Do you know the precepts of the church? First one. Ha. Second one. Dang. You shall attend Mass on Sunday. You shall confess your sins at least once a year. You shall observe the days of fast and abstinence established by the church. And perhaps the most important of all, you shall help to provide for the needs of the church. Tithing. Those precepts of the church, not just this one, I was teasing, but not just those precepts of the church also deserve our respect. They, along with the 10 Commandments, they help to define us. They keep us together. They keep us healthily together. Commandments. Commandments like those can feel so restrictive. They can appear to be restrictions on us. At the very least, they're telling us what we are to do and what we are to not do. But something in us doesn't like to be told what to do. When we were reciting those commandments, we probably all felt like 16-year-olds pushing back from mom and dad. In any relationship and with God, even the words shall and shall not become offensive to us. How is it that a people can be persuaded to accept a way of life that is clearly intended to fence them in? The answer is clear. For most of Israel's history, for more than 400 years, Israel was a nation of slaves. Then, without any action on their part to merit it, the people had experienced a series of miracles culminating in this passage through the Red Sea and the subsequent destruction of the enemies who were in pursuit of them. It was on that basis, the basis of that experience, that God had a right to give them these commandments. As the one who had given these people their freedom, God was now instructing them on how they could make the most of that freedom. Commandments, rules, boundaries. They're not born in a vacuum. They are the products of a relationship, of a good relationship trying to be better, trying to be healthier. And the only way you and I will accept these limitations is if the relationship has a claim on our hearts, if it has a prior claim on our hearts, a claim worth honoring. Every relationship in our life needs boundaries. Every relationship in our life needs rules for engagement. We don't like them a lot of the time. Something in us does indeed resist them. Perhaps it's a limitation, felt limitation on our control, our need for control, and this boundary is getting in the way of my ability to control, to get what I want to happen here. Yet no marriage is exempt from rules for engagement, nor is any friendship, nor is our relationships with communities in our lives, fraternities, sororities, schools, whatever it is, even including and perhaps especially the universal church. Nor is our relationship with God exempt from these rules, these boundaries, these commandments. Boundaries, ground rules, keep relationships healthy. Those fences do indeed make good neighbors. Those fences protect us so that we can flourish. Within those fences, people can engage in healthy and life-giving ways. A wild horse without a fence will never be tameable. The fence around the pen means we are able to finally be tamed within that fence. Fences force engagement within them. Granted, if those fences are too tight, if those rules are not held with mercy, they can indeed become too restrictive, too stifling. Relationships without boundaries, healthy boundaries, get sick very quickly. They can get unruly, literally, without rules, unruly. The boundaries that we establish in relationships are to be welcomed, and not resisted. Usually those boundaries arise in a marriage and a friendship, and also in communities. Those boundaries arise after a big fight, after some sort of breakdown of things. And so in our desire to move forward, we make new rules for engagement that will end up respecting the differences between us, between our partner and ourselves, that will keep both of us safe and indeed both of us respected. You and I, we can be so extraordinarily self-conscious about these rules when they're made. They're hard to keep. We keep forgetting, and then we hurt the other person, and we try to do it again and try to remember the next time. But if we don't welcome them, and if we don't discipline ourselves to hold on to them out of respect for this other person, an autonomous individual who has their own way of doing things and their own vulnerabilities versus the way we think everything should happen and the way things should be done all the time. We're two autonomous individuals trying to figure this out with different sensitivities. And I can't just plow through that relationship doing it my way from where I stand without learning what that means to the other person. Let me give you 4 examples. I was told by a student just Tuesday of last week that I give way too many examples. But just 4 this time. This one is for parents, for us with our parents, and for you who are parents, perhaps. Parents, as you see your sons and daughters emerging into adulthood, after they leave home for college, that former child of theirs, they have a right to a certain autonomy now. They have a right to be treated more as equals than they were when they were 12. And they have a right to some new healthy boundaries, not just keeping the old ones because they kind of satisfied you. What worked when I was 12 will not work when I'm 20 and I've been away at college for 2 years. And definitely not when I'm 50. Mom, I love you. But every time I tell you a story, I don't want you to start giving me advice. If one or the other doesn't start learning how to gently and firmly hold to that boundary, for example, keep that rule for engagement, that relationship is never going to advance. As a matter of fact, it will default. I've seen it way too many times. Dad, I love you. I totally respect your experience. But if you're not going to stop giving me advice every time I tell you something, I will stop bringing things to you because I don't feel safe. I don't feel respected. And it keeps me a child with you. I don't want to be just a child with you. I want to be an adult with you now. So if you would please stop doing that, that'd be so helpful to me and to my growing up. And if you can't, I love you, but I'm going to walk out of the room because I don't feel respected if you keep doing that. And I just want us to be healthy together. That's the rule, the new boundary that must be kept, or we will begin to resent each other at home, and we could lose so much that we have, that I appreciate. Second example, some questions don't need to be answered. You're the gatekeeper. If somebody asks you a question you don't want to answer, I'm going to give you an example of what you can say. Most of you know Kathy Moody. Kathy, are you here this morning? There she is. She's a pro. Kathy and I worked together for many years. She has this sort of blunt and yet kind, gentle way of keeping the boundary with me. If I would ask a question, for example, that was perhaps too personal, her response would always be, Gare, I can't imagine why you would need to know that. Hey, wait a minute. It did become a kind of gentle reminder to me, a rule between us, if you will, that I really have had to learn how to respect and actually welcome as a boundary that's good for me. It's good for me. It's good for Gary Brown to keep that boundary. And it certainly respects her. Third example, two sets of friends start dating each other. One wants to wait until marriage. The other didn't want to wait till marriage because they hadn't waited. For a time, learning where to set that boundary, that touch boundary between them, this unique couple, what touch was appropriate or not for their relationship, was a struggle, huge struggle for them. Boundaries in touch, in dating, are huge struggles, and they didn't always do it well. And then they would have to talk about it and see where it went from there. One couple eventually figured it out. And in that particular relationship, though one had not, they together in this particular relationship decided to wait until marriage. That's a hard new boundary together that they both ended up agreeing to. Another couple with the exact same configuration respectfully broke up. And they remain good friends to this day. But it's not a boundary they could honor together. For each of us, our boundaries are very different. But learning those boundaries, choosing the discipline, this sheet, by the way, are the disciplines of Lent we proposed for relationships for this community this year. There's a stack of them out there if you get a chance to grab one if you're new today. But they might give you a pause, and maybe you could choose one or two. We're about halfway through Lent now. Learning those disciplines, choosing to respect them, is the work of love. Learning the disciplines that a relationship demands, and each of the friendships in our life might have different disciplines, but learning them is the work of love. And if the other person does not respect my boundaries, or I'm not respecting those, and if he or she is continuously trying to breach those walls, hasta la vista, baby. Hasta la vista. No problem, it just didn't work. Fourth and last, and perhaps the briefest, When that university across the street gives us a scholarship for a graduate study program, they include stipulations for its use. That is their right, since they had made me the beneficiary of that gift. Just so, the one who gave life to Israel, gave them instructions for preserving the life that they had been given. You see, God now had a vested interest in this people, and a right, you see, to see that that interest is not squandered. So is that true in our relationships with each other and in the communities we're a part of. We need to take the time to consider our most significant relationship these days so that we can be tuned into little warning signs that say it's time to begin to establish a new healthy boundary here in love. We need to be finely tuned so that we know when a relationship is starting to get off track. We're arguing way too much. We're getting resentful. We're bickering more than we've ever bickered before. So something's off track here, and we need to make ground rules. And they're going to be awkward for a time, and we will be self-conscious trying to respect those boundaries, but it's so worth it. The learning curve, however steep, will bear great fruit. Boundaries are the best assurance we have that a relationship can be made to work. Are rules a hindrance? Are rules a frustration? Hardly. They are the essence of life. Without them, a relationship would not be a relationship. Boundaries have their own beauty because they are not only a function of love, they're also the best assurance we have that a relationship could be made to work. If we follow the rules, love will be on our side. To break those boundaries will not simply be an offense against God, it will end up being an offense against our best interests. When we violate the rules, we destroy the temple of relationship. When we violate the law, we destroy community. We corrupt our relationships, and they diminish our own worth. Let me conclude by saying, and I have to tell you this, if I were nothing but a secular pragmatist, wanting only to save my own skin and live somewhat effectively, I would obey the 10 Commandments. Good sense would tell me to do so. But as a believer and as a follower of Jesus, I have a far better reason to keep the commandments. Because I love God. And I want this relationship to work.